Good evening, everyone. Richard Cowperthwait for Northwest Access TV. This is the St. Albans Today Show, the March 7th, 2018 edition of the St. Albans Today Show. Thanks for joining us. It's a live show, at least if you're watching us live. And pleased to have representatives from St. Albans City and St. Albans Town, including the newly elected mayor of St. Albans City, Mr. Tim Smith. Tim, welcome.
Hello, Richard, thank you.
And Al Voegele, St. Albans Town Select Board member.
Thank you.
So, Tim, technically, you get sworn in Monday night, so are we kind of in limbo land here? Technically not mayor. You won't be making any big decisions over the next few days?
No big decisions. Liz is holding her breath.
Yeah.
Make sure nothing major happens in that time frame. But
so Monday night you'll be sworn in?
yes.
Along with the new city clerk treasurer, Curry Galloway?
Actually, Curry got sworn in last night after the election.
Is that right? Wow. Yeah, because I talked to Sue briefly when I voted yesterday in the city, and yeah, it sounded like Sue was prepared to leave office as soon as possible.
Yeah, so, I was hoping to have it done last night as well, but
really?
I was missing a wife and a child, so
is that right?
We're going to do it on Monday night.
Speaking of which, I guess everybody thought you were running unopposed there, and apparently another Smith, one Duffy Smith, jumped in and got, what, 30 write-in votes?
30 votes.
Or write-up votes, whatever.
Write-up votes, yeah.
We talked about that off air a little bit. We talked about that last night a little bit, but so when did that materialize?
Materialized probably late, soon after I announced, but late January probably, and the beginning of it was Joe Luno talking to his son Sam, who Duffy and Sam are in the same class.
Yeah.
Joe educated Sam about a write-up or a write-in campaign, but the boys call it a write-up campaign. So they're all in the same class, and along with Luke Gagnon and Gavin Putzer and Elliot Delorier. So they were all talking about it, and figured they could make a run at it, and so Duffy followed through with it. And as I shared with you, it was a nice moment. He came out of his comfort shell a little bit and talked to people he didn't know, and handled himself well, and so it was a nice family outing.
Interesting. What did he have? Did he put together some proposals? He
had a couple.
Campaign literature or anything?
He just had Vote for Duffy to educate people about what. But his platform was more after-school activities and no set bedtime.
And no set bedtime.
Those were the two.
How old is he?
9.
9.
Those are the two major ones.
Interesting.
But he like I said, he made flyers. He had a bigger campaign staff than me. At any certain time, he could have had 4 people handing out flyers.
Really? Interesting. Sounds like a good experience.
It was a fun event.
And I guess, fortunately, no offense to Duffy, but fortunately, he didn't win. You still came out a few votes ahead.
Many people asked me that question, Richard. What would happen if he did win? And I said I don't care, because it wouldn't be my problem.
Interesting. It makes me think of I can't think of the kid's name, but he's been getting some attention. I think the 13 or 14-year-old who announced for Vermont governor a while back. I love in some newscasts how he's mentioned just like the other candidates. I've been, I guess, happy. No offense to the kid, good for him. But the last couple of stories on the governor's race, he's either hasn't been mentioned or is at the bottom. But that sounds like a good situation.
It was a great learning experience.
Well, sounds like it.
From my point of view, what's really important is that these young people are starting to get involved in their community at an early age, and that bodes well for our future.
Now, you've certainly talked about that a number of times. So, that must look kind of cool to you.
Yes. Generation Z, I think, with the gun protests out of Florida and mobilizing nationally, I think is just fantastic. It reminds me, again, of the Vietnam War protesters.
To that point now, I spoke to Curry briefly about the potential of doing a youth ballot. Something, nothing major, 2 or 3 votes, and have a section cordoned off for the kids when they come in with their parents. And I think
just a mock vote, a mock
vote,
election thing.
We could still report out what the results are.
Yeah.
But what it does is it gets the kids in the habit of voting. Just like we all did, you learn to go and you vote every time there's a vote.
I think St. Albans Free Library typically does that. I think at least presidential elections. I know my kid voted a few times in a mock presidential election at least. But especially town meeting day, it'd be nice to see some more young people obviously paying attention to town meeting day.
Yeah, I saw a number of parents bring their younger children in and had the patience to let their child mark the ballot
Really?
on their behalf, and then put it into the machine for counting or the box for the school budget. And that was really warming, that parents would bring their kids and do that. Somebody asked me, sitting next to me at the desk, if I had done that, and I said, yeah, my first vote was for Eisenhower as a child.
But, to take Al's point a little bit further, I mean, my daughter's 10 and Duffy's 9, and we had a lot of discussions last night about how they could be involved. They made a whole list of positions, and I'm seriously considering doing a youth panel. Coordinate it with the city school and at least try to. It's all about engagement,
It is.
If we can start them young, if it means me going to the city school once a month to have a discussion, then so be it.
That sounds great. I bet
It's
you
also
get
good
some
for
good
your other
ideas
job
out of
to
that.
get kids aware of what
Right,
businesses we have
that's right,
in the city and town, because again, all the demographics saying we're not going to have enough employees into the future.
Yeah, talk to Tim. Tim could probably talk about that issue for a while.
But to keep the kids here, let them know what's going on, and if they can involved in the community, they have an additional purpose to stay.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Tim,
Right.
speaking about going to the schools, I'm not sure Liz did it. I suspect Peter Delory or Marty Manahan. Would you consider having like regular, and I realize you're a busy guy, believe me, consider having like regular public office hours or an hour or two once in a while? Has that crossed your mind?
Actually, I hadn't thought about that, Richard. I think it's a great idea. I've had a number of things cross my mind. That wasn't one of them. But
I don't mean to wipe out more. Just reading.
No, I think I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, I wonder if your predecessors may have done that. Seems like I vaguely recall somebody having like a public hour or two, maybe like on a Saturday morning or something.
Yeah. What people probably don't realize is there is a mayor's office in City Hall.
Yeah.
I will be using it on a regular basis, so coordinating a time while I'm in there is not, and publicizing it would be no problem at all. So,
Al, let's talk about the town again. 2 contested select board races in the town. I think you're happy with the 2 winners. Stan Dukas returns to the select board after a 1-year absence, defeating David McWilliams, who got a bunch of votes. David, a former selectman, but Stan winning that race. Dick Day coming in 3rd. And I think probably maybe a little more suspense about the contested race for the 2-year term with Bruce Cheeseman, the select board chair.
And Sam.
Fending off a challenge from the board's now former vice chair, I guess, Sam Smith.
Right.
With Buddy McWilliams, David's brother, coming in 3rd and Dick Day 4th. But you're happy with the 2 victors there?
Yes, I mean, all Sam Smith and Bruce and are well-qualified people of understanding of the issues and so forth. So I think either one would serve the community well, and I think that Bruce, being the present chair, will have is a good choice by the public. But either way, the town would have been well served.
Yeah, and again, you'll be meeting, for folks watching us live, you'll reorganize next Monday night. That'd be Monday, March 12th. And Tim, that's when you'll be sworn in. Anyway. So, again, school budgets. Again, we had our show last night. School budgets tend to fare pretty well. Highgate certainly had some life with the ambulance issue. Of course, another big issue in St. Albans City, Tim, the latest TIF, tax increment financing project, and that's a big project.
Yes, big project. I haven't really had time. I sat down with Dominic on that, Dominic and Liz beforehand, but we have not had a in-depth conversation about it.
Yep, some new buildings downtown. Again, just kind of adding to the ongoing downtown revitalization. A new place for the police department, of course.
Yeah, and I think there's still a lot of misunderstanding about the TIF.
Yeah.
I think there's still some education that can be done relative to how it works and what the impacts are. A lot of people are still of the mindset that we may be stuck with the bill in 20 years. I disagree with that. I think your TIF bond payment is only as good as the developments that you have.
Yeah.
And we've been fortunate enough to have some major developments to cover that TIF bond.
Which, of course, in the case of St. Albans City, which we're talking about, the Milan expansion being the real key, the biggest fuel. And that actually makes me think of, I know they've had at least one layoff, but hearing just kind of rumblings about my land once in a while. We should note for anybody who's been living in a cave out there, doesn't know Mr. Smith, Tim, the longtime executive director of FCIDC, Franklin County Industrial Development Corp. But that's the one concern I hear kind of about the TIF. Gee, we hope my land hangs in pretty good shape. Anything you can say about my land? Sounds like they're not having maybe the best of times these days.
Yeah, we haven't had direct conversations.
Yeah.
A lot of it, we've had conversations with employees but not top management.
Yeah.
So we have a feel for it. They're in a tough market in the sense that they spend years on producing a product.
Yeah.
And you never know when or if it's going to be accepted. And so I think a couple times they've had products go to market that maybe were not received as well as they had hoped.
Yeah.
Or if they don't kick themselves in the butt.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So there's different aspects of that, and hopefully they will rebound and we'll get back to where they were.
Yeah.
I understand they're below 500 jobs now, which is nothing to shirk, but it's at their peak they were about 640, 650.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow. Interesting.
I don't think their production's down. It's a redefining of job descriptions and improved efficiency?
I'm not so sure of that. I think there's some poor sales that have led to it as well.
Oh, because of the EpiPen?
No, just some products they've produced have not been well received. Yeah.
Of course, the EpiPen, you almost mentioned that. Certainly got a pretty good hit of bad PR over the EpiPen for a while. Speaking of, while we're on the subject of jobs, certainly activity out in the St. Albans Town Industrial Park, Tim. Big expansion for Ben & Jerry's. Is that still ongoing, Tim? The Ben & Jerry's expansion?
Close to being wrapped up now.
Close to being wrapped up.
They're finalizing their efficiency on the new lines that they've put in. So all the major construction aspects are done.
Some more jobs with that expansion, I assume.
It was 50 when it was first announced.
Really?
So those are still in the. I think those were being filled as they were constructing it. Training people on the other lines and then converting them to the new lines as they were completed. So.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I hope I'm not wrong because I've certainly mentioned this before. Isn't the St. Albans Town Ben & Jerry's plant, isn't that their biggest manufacturing plant? They got any bigger plants anywhere? For ice cream, obviously?
Yeah, it doesn't, Waterbury doesn't compare to it.
I don't think, of course, Waterbury gets all the attention, of course, because it's the tours and stuff, but
Then they have one in Henderson, Nevada.
Nevada.
And that one is not the size of this one as well.
St. Albans Town, I think, is the biggest.
Don't they have one in Europe somewhere?
They have one in Israel. Don't they maybe have one in Israel?
I'm not sure of the actual location, but you're right. There's one in Europe.
Interesting. And Peerless still expanding in the park. That's ongoing.
Peerless. If you drive by, you would see the steel erection.
Okay.
They are that in itself is about a $24 million project.
Wow.
And once again, there is some job creation there. As is across the street at Barry Callebaut.
Barry Callebaut also.
Doing another large expansion, and they are projecting 50 jobs as well.
Wow.
The job creation, I don't want to go off on my other job, but
they kind of fit. They kind of flow together a little bit. I think.
How do they mesh? But the job creation is great for sure, but we're at a level where we're at a point where all of them are becoming difficult to fill.
Wow.
Finding people, and Al knows this as well as anyone. I mean,
sure seems like it. I mean, what convenience? I mean, just like convenience store, fast food restaurant. Is there one you go by that doesn't have a help wanted sign? And I don't mean to just talk about those guys.
Hannaford's has an ongoing sign.
Right.
I mean,
hiring just about everybody.
It's going to be. I have said countless times that this is going to be a problem for the decade. I mean, or beyond.
Yeah.
And if I had a concern is that if we can't fill them, we'll start taking steps backwards.
I mean, presumably, if these folks can't fill the jobs, they'll obviously think about going elsewhere.
They'll find someplace that can.
No, that strikes me. Just just observationally, it just seems like a huge issue, and you would obviously know that big time.
Yeah, let me just add though one thing.
Yeah.
That I've come across some people, elderly people, who are on Social Security and fixed incomes, getting very low income, and need supplementary jobs to survive.
Yeah.
And I think there are jobs in all those companies where they could redefine some of their work so that some of the older people with not as great strength and so forth could still fulfill those jobs. It would serve two purposes: help them with the money needs, and also then relieve, not all, but some of the employment.
No, for sure. I've said many times that over the next 10 years, it's going to need to be all hands on deck.
Yeah.
It's going to be the population that Al talks about. It's going to be us doing a better job in our high schools and schools, educating people about opportunities, as Al had mentioned earlier. It's going to be retraining addicts and convicts. I mean, we need to have a different tone about how we receive them in the workforce, and all of those are going to be needed for us to move forward. And I know last night I watched where he had the conversation of our school population is growing a little bit, but not to the level that we're going to need as baby boomers exit the workforce.
And to that end, both communities need to work together on a housing system whereby we have more affordable housing. So the brand newly married can step in at a low investment, and then eventually move, as they get jobs and promotions, can move up in other houses. But we've really got to deal with the housing crisis to attract young people from other parts of the state.
And I'll just jump on that. Kathy Lavoie and I have spoken many times about doing a CEO roundtable or someone at that level with all the companies and covering many different topics, whether it's housing, transportation, childcare, training, whatever it is, bring them to the table and see how we might, as a community, as a county, really focus on addressing some of those issues moving forward. So.
Yeah, there's some big issues out there. And what about, just seems like, good luck if you're after a plumber or an electrician. I mean, it seems like it's getting more difficult to find some of those folks. We got a phone call. Maybe we'll come back to that. Thank you, caller. We have our first call. Fire away.
Yes, I figured I had to call in and congratulate Mr. Tim Smith. I've known him for a long time when he was a little whippy recreation director when he first came to work for the city of St. Albans, and I worked around him for the many years that I worked for the city, and I hope, Tim, that you can straighten the city out.
Who's this calling?
What do you think, David? Do you think he can? How would you bet money on that?
I would bet Tim's a good communicator, and that's one thing he's good at. I already told him that he ought to be city manager and replace Dominic. So I've already told him that. He knows it, and that's why he's smiling. So, congratulations, Tim. I think you'll do a good job.
Thank you, David.
Yeah.
Hey, David.
St. Albans Town, we need to work on getting our taxes down under control. I know we have a lot of money in our some of the funds we got. We ought to be taking some of that 1% sales tax and decreasing the property taxes in St. Albans Town because the fact that a lot of senior citizens are nicking and tucking as far as trying to pay their bills and stuff like that. So I hope the town garage goes on the Brigham Road. The Bay Dock, that should be totally torn out and put in a pier, in my opinion. The highway, as far as the town hall up on exit 19 or on the Fisher Pond Road, in my opinion, that's already a failed traffic area, and I think you know it, Al, and I know it, that the study has proven that they want to put a roundabout on exit 19, so, there's enough traffic. If you want to go up there and count cars, you'd have fun trying to keep up with the amount of cars that are in that area. Fisher Pond, Fairfield, and exit 19. So, yeah, maybe next year I'll run again. I haven't figured out which one I want to run for, whether I want to go get Lynn Dickinson or run for the select board again.
David, you got a bunch of votes yesterday, unsuccessful, but I know you take this seriously. I'm sure you gave it a good effort, so.
Yeah, I give it a good effort, and, the voters came out and supported Stan Dukas. I hope he remembers that the voters put him there and keep the taxes under control because our school budgets are going up. Because we don't know what our town tax rate is because the grand list has not been finalized, so. We're hoping that $300,000 that we put towards our tax bill will make it probably less than 1%. I'm hoping for that. Our public access studio is doing good. The fence is down, the sign is on the front of the building, and it's starting to take real good shape. We hope to be in it by, I would say, late April. So. That's what we're hoping. We've got some equipment we have to buy before we can actually go live on that station up there. So, but it's coming along.
Yeah, I know you put in a ton of work on that. Good to get that update.
Yeah. It's looking good. We have a maple leaf on the front of the building. It looks just like on the front of your table there. And I went up there last night and walked around the building. I think the light should be more onto the sign itself because at night it's hard to see the letters, but that's my opinion, But the building's 98% done on the inside, so we're happy with it. And the employees won't be stuffed in boxes anymore. They'll have a place where they can have their offices, to do their work, and we can have more things going up there. We got a classroom. Plus the big studio, that studio that you're sitting in right now is it's probably 3 times as bigger than what that is right now. So
David,
we're hoping that that'll give us the future of Northwest PEG access. So,
David, is the classroom open to the public?
You have to go through Elizabeth, if you want to, take and use it. It's set up so we can do shows in the studio and also have the classroom right there. So. We'll be having an open house. It's up to Elizabeth to set that up, for when we have it, and invite all the public and the subscribers to come up and take a look at it.
Very, very good.
Very good.
Hey, thanks for the update.
Thank you, David.
Thanks,
Yeah,
David.
bye.
Our number, 527-6449. Love to get some more calls. I was just getting into blue-collar workers. Boy, if there are a lot of electricians and plumbers and folks like that around, I'm not aware of it. But talk about good-paying jobs, Tim. Can we interest folks, some young folks in some very good-paying jobs?
And I think that goes directly to utilizing our high schools and educating students that there are other opportunities outside of trying to get into college.
I think we really got to look at technical education, and I'm not convinced that building is big enough for what we really need to do. So I think, I hear the tax issue, but if you want to survive, you got to invest. And I think the next step is to look at the technical education and maybe put them in another facility somewhere else, so they have much greater services to offer, and then link to the companies that need those employees.
We've met with a mason who is constructing a new facility here in the area, and they've turned down jobs this past summer because they didn't have enough help. So it's a mason, could be a great occupation for someone. As you said, the plumber, the electrician. There's many opportunities.
Painter.
Yeah.
Painter.
I mean, the construction set is just the average age of a construction foreman is 58. And not a whole lot of backflow, coming up. Yeah. So
that's just a huge, as you said, huge issue.
It's going to be the issue, and for years to go.
I believe it. And Franklin County is obviously no different. I mean, the rest of the state, is Chittenden County in a little better shape with a much bigger population, or is...
No, I mean, the
same issues everywhere.
Chittenden County, the population is exponential. I mean, the jobs are exponential. So they still have, they might have 3 times more jobs to fill than what we do.
3 times as many people.
But if we're fortunate in one area, we're not we're not seeing a declining population like they are in Brattleboro, Bennington areas, Rutland. So we're fortunate from that perspective.
Yeah. One of these days we'll hit 50,000. We're like probably 49 plus right now.
49.5, I think.
Pretty close to 50,000. Yeah.
I think we got to look at the immigration. If don't have enough people living in the community and populating it, then there are opportunities to bring in immigrants that can significantly help us. And so we could make efforts in that realm to attract those people who are dislocated from their nations and want to settle in the United States and hopefully in cold Vermont to make a lifetime for their families and children.
Of course, it may not be lifetime people, but I mean, the dairy industry obviously comes to mind without I think largely Hispanic workers and stuff. Tim, you address that in your report, in the town report, just concerned about the dairy industry. Boy, take those folks away. So it would be even, I think, a lot tougher shape.
I think you'd lose a lot of farms.
I would think so. We're down to what, I think under 800 as it is.
Right. Losing a lot now.
A lot of issues out there. Realizing you're just starting out as mayor. Any issues in the city that you have any concerns about? And as a city, I mean, again, downtown revitalization, very visible things, and you're certainly paying attention to this in your job. You may be more than just paying attention, but any things you're concerned about, or is the city going along pretty well as you see it?
I think obviously the drug issue is still a concern. I think Gary Taylor has done a nice job addressing it and moving that forward, but it's still there, and when we're not alone. Obviously, that's well documented, but that's probably the number one. Other than that, I don't have any major concerns. I mean, I think there's a number of things we can do to improve the community, and whether it's neighborhood improvements or I stated earlier, youth activities. I'm a strong believer that kids who come from low-income families may not be able to afford playing hockey or Little League or whatever, and trying to address, and Kelly Vians and I had one conversation on this, and we're of the belief it's not the money that's the issue. I think there's enough resources where funding could help offset the cost to have these kids involved. And I don't want to come off like sports is the end all, but I think those kids who, and I've coached enough sports, that those kids who do get involved, and I'll just use the teams that I coach, we require them to listen, eye contact, work as a team, pay attention. I mean, all skills that will carry over to the schools, all skills that will carry over to the house, to the home. If they choose not to play when they get to high school, at least they have that base established where if they want to do something else, they can. But so I think there's some real opportunities there to get as many kids as we can involved. And I say sports, but as Kelly and I have spoken, it's not just sports. It might be, learning to play the piano or arts and crafts or whatever it is. At least they have that opportunity to be in a setting which requires those skills that I mentioned. So,
it's after school programs, and I think the schools could do a lot more in terms of establishing programs. It also helps parents who are working until 5 o'clock to have their children safe, but then the children have options to explore either sports or painting, what have you, the artistic realms, and doing homework with the help of another student or a college student. Yeah. So I think we really need to look at that. I just want to make one thing. You talk about St. Albans City, but they're now involved in a Maple Run school district, which includes Fairfield and the town and the city. And I think on that level, we should look as a larger community. And so that what we do in the city, we could do in the town, we could also do in Fairfield. So that, because we depend on those Fairfield kids too for jobs.
Oh, no doubt. And you know, I talk about the city rec, but the town is equally involved in that as the city is. So when I guess I wasn't referring so much about the Fairfield, but Fairfield participates in the rec programs on a number of different levels, and so I think that's an area that I'd like to focus on as well. You know, I had a brief conversation with both Carrie at the town and with Leon Berthium.
Yeah,
Co-op. They have started their 100th year of doing business.
That's a good point.
I think both communities need to do something to acknowledge it. I'm not sure what it is. I want to sit down and have that conversation with Marty Manahan and Dominic.
Yeah. And of course the co-op expansion also, I should note, I mentioned Mylan also certainly figuring into the TIF and the downtown revitalization initiatives.
But if you look at our cultural heritage around the area with sugaring and obviously dairy and the involvement that the co-op has had in the region, I think it's important to recognize the success of them for a 100-year anniversary. So we'll have that discussion as well, and you know, whether it's putting banners up on the light poles or doing some type of celebration, we'll have.
Just swipe an idea from Burlington. They had the cows that you could paint, and cows were important to the
that's a wonderful idea.
Just like we had the chairs in the park and around the town.
I think that's a great idea.
Tim, what do you think under your mayorship? Can we finally look forward to after many decades, resolving the wastewater issue between the city and town? You'll leave that to your successor or successors?
I would.
It sounds like we're getting. Again, we've talked about it on the previous shows. We're getting closer. Is there a tentative agreement, or you tell me what's on the table now? Is there a tentative agreement or some draft agreement?
There's a draft agreement that both the city and town are trying to work towards some understanding of agreement. And if that agreement ever comes to fruition, then we'd actually do the details of such of a contract. But I think we are slowly moving at a snail's pace, I grant you, but moving towards a understanding. I can't speak for the select board, and I'm not the chair, 'cause he's absent, but just I think if we both fail, I think then it's a major disservice to the entire community. So for me, we have to succeed.
And I would repeat that. I mean, I don't know if people know this, but I am all for any collaboration that we can do with the town. You know, I know it hasn't always been easy in the past for a variety of reasons, but I think Dominic, and once again, I'm not. I was going to say I don't want to speak for him, but I'm going to speak for him in that I think Dominic has been very active in trying to move things forward. And I would support him to do that, continue to do that as well. I think there are some great successes, you know, whether it's the rec department or what's happening with police and fire. I mean, there's, you know, I think 20 years ago, I don't think anyone would have guessed that we would be doing what we're doing together. So.
And that's a good point. I certainly try to make that point. I mean, I always ask about wastewater, which has just been, you know, just one of those issues unresolved for decades. But as you say, there's certainly been some good movement, some good collaboration on a number of other fronts, which you mentioned. Now, police contract, town seems pretty satisfied with them.
Yep.
And again, fire, we might see some.
We haven't really moved.
Talk about possible merger
moved
between
much on that since November.
That's kind of gotten a little quieter.
Yeah, I think now that the elections are over and we can push more to try to get back to the table and figure out how to do it.
Tim, just with your job, again, longtime executive director of Franklin County Industrial Development Corp., you see I can't imagine it would come up much, and maybe not at all, you would tell me, any concern that at some point there might be a bit of a conflict between your job and being mayor of St. Albans?
For sure.
The obvious thing that comes to mind, I guess it wouldn't be a big business, with St. Albans City not having seemingly a lot of land, but if there's a business out there looking at the city and town, but that just crossed my mind.
Yeah, no, for sure, Richard.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had, before I even threw my name into the ring for mayor, I had discussion with my board.
Yeah.
We talked about it at board meetings as to what that potential might be for conflict. Yeah. We discussed it again last week. We had our February board meeting, and it came up again that any inclination of that conflict of interest, I would recuse myself, and our board chair, Mark LaRoe, or our development chair, who's Brent Bruley, would step forward and have those conversations. So
that didn't indeed come up.
Yeah, so we're well versed in it. We're very conscientious of it. So we would, I think maybe almost to a fault, I will recuse myself in that situation if those discussions come to the forefront.
I assume you wouldn't think that. Maybe it won't come up at all. You wouldn't think it would come up much, but it might.
Well, one incident just did, actually.
Oh, is that right?
There was a company looking at the industrial park.
Yeah.
And sort of the outcome now is they're looking at the Fonda site, and the reason they're doing that is because Fonda has access to the new market tax credits, and that's pretty much what's going to take to make the deal happen, if it does happen.
Yeah.
So, that was an easy one, because it wasn't so much an either-or scenario. It is, this doesn't work for us financially, and we have to go this route. So, but that was a discussion we had as well. So.
The proposal, such as it is, I haven't heard much talk about it, but a 925-bed prison, and it sounds like Franklin County was a place being mentioned for that. I guess possibly St. Albans Town. Al, have you heard much about it? And the governor didn't sound like he was wholeheartedly behind that.
Right. Well, the select board did authorize me to attend the legislative meetings.
Oh, yeah.
And so I went to my first institutions committee meeting, and it didn't happen because they were discussing the gun issue. The Senate was in discussion on the gun issue, but I did have an opportunity to meet the chair.
And this is House or Senate institutions?
This is the Senate.
Senate institutions.
They had planned a meeting with Al Gabil and his team about placing the forensic unit presently at the St. Albans Correctional Site.
Okay.
And so I'll be representing the town at those hearings, or at least sitting in, listening to, and working with whoever I can to bring that information back to the town. But also, I asked the chair if she'd be willing to bring the committee to our area to meet with the citizens and to hear what our concerns might be, or positives, whatever.
Yeah.
And so she said that the committee likes to travel. They'd be willing to come up. So once we get organized, I will then move to get some sort of a letter. Yeah. Maybe we could co-sign a letter. I understand the city's much interested in this issue too. To invite the Senate Institutions Committee to visit St. Albans as they move forward. Now, she did say, the chair did say, that they are a long, long way from making any decision about where to put this facility. That there's a lot of controversy about it, and the size of it, etc. So I don't see it as an imminent threat, but I do think it's important that we follow it carefully, because thus far it's been identified with our correctional center.
And it's certainly been identified with Franklin County. I haven't heard about any other place, but again, I'm not sure how solid this proposal. The governor even seemed to not embrace this, he was keeping a little distance from this, but I haven't even seen much on this lately.
It doesn't make if you're talking about psychiatry and mental health for prisoners who are mentally ill, or in a crisis and have committed a crime, it doesn't seem logical from Brattleboro to drive all the way up here. It seems to me it needs to be centrally located somewhere in the Rutland area or Randolph, and so that any part of the state can get there within an hour's drive, not 2 to 3 hours.
Yeah.
And that's one piece I was going to share. If I've heard anything, it's that the legislators from down south aren't real happy about sticking it in the northwest corner. I think they ultimately will be pushing for a more central location.
Yeah.
I'm not privy to any conversation that the council has had relative to this, if any. I think a lot of people feel it's very premature and it's a ways away. So I don't think anyone. Yeah. I mean, it affects the town obviously a lot more. Well,
presumably it's not going to locate in the city. Presumably,
right. So I think it's on the menu, but I don't think it's a priority right now.
Yeah, and now that's kind of how you see it,
right?
Also,
I just want to keep track of it. Make sure that we have the intelligence so that we know how to think it through. The other thing I haven't heard, and once I hear that testimony, but it seems to me our nation is changing in its aspects of how we treat people accused of crimes, and to differentiate between the violent crimes and the nonviolent crimes, that we maybe not need a larger prison in the future. If we're really talking about rehabilitation or fitting back into the community, those who commit nonviolent crimes maybe don't need to be incarcerated, or at some level. But I'm not so sure we need a 900-bed facility anywhere in the state, or a collective beds of 900. I think we need to look at how do we reduce that number.
Can I just jump on? Probably the most interesting thing that I thought about this whole discussion, and I think Al might have been there, is at the Swanton Legislative Breakfast, when this question was brought up, or this discussion was brought up. It was interesting to know that not a single legislator from Franklin County was aware of this, and it wasn't, the information wasn't shared with them prior to the release
of the big prison.
The 903rd. So it was released. I think Kathy Keenan was notified by someone who heard it on BPR, and someone else heard it on Channel 3. So they were contacted. But you would think you would bring your legislative delegation on board with it.
You think,
if you're going to release something that the response we heard or they heard was, that's the way it's done. And so I just thought it was a lack of respect for our delegation.
Yeah.
And it's not the way it's done, because when I was in Colchester and the new health department facility, there was a whole lot of interaction between the town and the state
and that's
and the
what you would
university.
think,
Right. And it was actually our representative that clued us into the Institutions Committee meeting the day before, and that's why I was asked to go down.
Yeah.
Different administration.
Yep.
So,
now, speaking of the town where you served for many years as town manager, of course, I don't know if they've hired a new town. Did you think about going back for another stint in Colchester, or have you had enough down there?
No, I love the job, but if you will, I'm getting too old.
No. Have they hired? No, Don Francis is leaving. Did they have they hired somebody?
Yes, they hired the assistant director.
Oh, they did.
Okay.
Yeah. And he's an excellent person.
Yeah.
Came from CCTA. And good man. Great with numbers.
We've got another call. Go ahead, caller. Thanks for calling.
Yeah, did you hear anything more about Cisco taking over in Highgate?
You're talking about the ambulance service?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was at the Highgate town meeting. I spent hours here yesterday. Yeah, it was a very emotional issue.
Did they get it?
Yeah, the vote was to bring back basically Missisquoi Valley Rescue when Ann Care's contract expires on June 30th.
Yeah, Ann Care didn't get it, did they?
No, Missisquoi Valley Rescue won the day, basically. They'll be coming back.
Okay, thank you very much. That's all I wanted to know.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Bye.
Where were we?
Colchester.
No, sorry, we're talking Colchester. So, anyway. Tim, looks like city, I guess the town also, pretty stable workforce and I realize you're, haven't dug in at this point, but in terms of number of employees, how the city runs, seems to, from up to now, you're outside observing, seems to be running pretty well.
Yeah,
I think we may have I know Alan Rob Toys, I think.
That's one I was going to share. If I had a concern, it's replacing Alan Rob.
Right, and it sounds like that'll be happening later this year. It sounds
November. I think in passing, I ran into him. We were in our cars, and he had made the comment that if I win, he might stick around longer. So I don't know if he was joking or serious. I'm hoping he was serious. I think everyone knows Alan to be a great individual whose first priority is the city of St. Albans. He'll bend over backwards for anything that is for the good of the city and the residents. And, you know, he's been recognized by Rotary and Vermont Leagues of Cities and Towns. I think that knowledge base, you just can't replace it overnight. It's something that you need to, and fortunately, I don't think he's going anywhere, so we will still have him available.
He'll be around. Hopefully.
But yeah, no, that's
that'll be a big.
I think that's the biggest void that if I had a concern, that would be it.
And of course, Alan Mashed here, Al, who worked for the City Public Works, sounds like doing a good job for you folks.
Excellent. Right, we're very pleased and happy with them.
Yeah, and I would, you know, I would support. I think Alan Mashed here has done a wonderful job for the town. We've interacted with him on a few things for FCIDC, but just you know, did the rink down at the park, trying to do a farmer's market.
Right.
You know, I just think he's been a great addition to the town.
A lot of foresight, a lot of vision for the community.
Yeah.
And
a lot of ownership.
A lot of ownership.
A lot of ownership.
And again, as we talked about, another good case of the city and town. Sounds like the, excuse me, the respective public works departments work together well, help each other out. So it sounds like they do very well, you know.
Yeah, they know each other, and because of Alan now and having previously worked for
even more of a connection.
Right.
Yeah. Tim, when did you, let's go back to it, and again, congratulations on your mayoral election. When did you, again, I think Liz had, I talked to Liz, I guess she had told some folks even into late last year that she planned to run again, and I guess she had a late change of heart. Had she not, had she run again, you wouldn't have jumped in, or you wouldn't have thought about it?
No. I only do
that news. Had you been thinking about running for mayor at some point?
No, not really. I mean,
sure, you're looking for more things to do. I know you don't have trouble filling up your time.
Hours,
Kidding, of course.
I mean, my political campaign strategy is to run unopposed.
Good strategy.
And Liz, you know, 6 years. You know, that crosses my mind. How long will I?
Yeah.
You know, and if it's up to me, how long will I run? If it is up to me.
Yeah.
6 years is a long time.
It is.
I am naive to the commitment.
Yeah.
You know, when in discussions with Liz, you know, she said 3, 4, 5 years ago when the streetscape was really heavy and the garage and everything else, she spent a lot of time. The last 2 years, not so much, is what Liz has shared with me.
Yeah.
You know, we will have different styles or different interests, so I'm sure I will be doing many hours. I'm hoping to include the family in a lot of things we do.
Right.
I hope this is a lesson in civics for my kids. I think it has been already, as we discussed. It was a great day yesterday, and having them experience that. I hope to have them at my swearing in. So, it hadn't really crossed my mind, Richard. Liz and her husband Ted and Denise and I are friends, and it came up, and I had a few people ask me. I thought about it. I had to discuss it with my board, and you know, with their support, I started to take it a little bit further.
Interesting.
And finally, I said I got to make the fish or cut bait, so we jumped in.
But nothing you had been pondering. I mean, years ago that you wanted to be mayor at some point.
I could tell you, at the end of 2017, there was no thought in my mind whatsoever.
Really? Interesting.
But now, are you talking about nepotism?
Yeah. Yes, I am now.
And Liz, you think, what are you going to say? I think Liz did a pretty good job as mayor. Certainly a lot to show, literally to show for it.
You know, I admire Liz a lot. I mean, she, you know, I joke with her when they first moved to the area, and I guess that was about 20 years ago, and Liz was at United Way. We shared a building together, office building together on the corner where Ace Hardware is. Then she moved to the city. I mean, she has been picked up by some great organizations. They saw her talent, from the city to Vermont Electric Co-op to Efficiency Vermont, and now Community Foundation. So, she's highly admired across the state, not only for her work performance, but also the fact that women in politics, being the mayor, and so. Just to that point, I think the concern with me not being sworn in yet is to what happened to the prior Smith in the mayor role with Janet,
Right.
and whether to make sure I get sworn in time before anything happens.
Yes, well, I hope Monday will come sooner than later for you. Al, a big issue in the town in 2018, I guess. Again, talk about the new site for the town hall.
Right.
Again, you heard David not happy with. I guess you have two sites kind of earmarked at this point.
Right. We're down to actually one now. We have to.
You're down to one site now.
Yep.
Okay.
And we'll do some more engineering on that site to make sure that what the cost will be to develop it. And then we'll also sit down then with the owner and try to.
Can you say, is that the Ingleside site?
Right.
Or?
It is the Ingleside.
Okay.
And then sit down with the owner and hopefully come to an agreement.
To David's comment, he's concerned about the traffic up there. Is that a concern to you folks, or not especially?
Well, it's a concern, but I don't. The people in the new town hall will not add that significantly. People coming to visit town hall will probably not be doing it on the high travel areas of 8 o'clock in the morning or 5 at night. They'll come in between those hours. So the larger driving issues, when we were talking to people, is they want it more centrally located to two things: access to the city, so you got the sidewalk system, and then secondly, to where most of the people in the town live, and that's on this east end. And it's between Hardack and Collins Pearly. So there's a lot of connectivity to this town hall. That was important.
What will if it does come to fruition, what would the former town hall be utilized as? Has there been any thought to that?
It's such an old structure, and I'm not so sure. There's been a lot of ideas for it to be a youth hostel or some sort of a restaurant, but I'm not sure. There's no committee there looking at it, what to do with it. It's a very old building. You're going to have to put in an elevator. It's got very limited septic, so.
So clear to you. I mean, basic no-brainer. It's time to move on a new site. Is that?
Well, we did have an engineering study done to look at what it would cost to rehab the existing facility or build a new.
Yeah.
And it turned out that to fix the town hall as it is would cost about $2 million. And it would have a lifespan of, because of the vault, have a lifespan of 10 years. If we build a brand new facility, we could also do that for $2 million approximately, and have a much larger vault, which would carry us 50 to 100 years. So again, it didn't seem, from an engineering point of view, rehabilitation point of view, made sense to stay in the existing building.
Yeah. Timeline, is that something, do you hope to move on that this year?
I would like to. I'm only one of 5.
And this presumably would go to the voters, asking voters to appropriate however much money is needed to...
Yes, I'm sure we'd need a bond.
Of course, you've got can you tap your significant local option infrastructure fund? I mean, could some of that come into play?
Some of that could. We really have to think through a long-range capital plan.
Yeah. You've got some. Are we talking about $2 million in that?
Yep.
That's a pretty nice kitty right there. Mm-hmm. And again, is a plan, Department of Public Works, now of course in St. Albans Bay also, is a plan to move that?
To the Brigham Road.
Okay, to the Brigham Road.
Right.
Okay, so separate site.
Right. We had a long debate about that, whether putting it with the town hall.
Okay.
But their needs, the trucks coming in and out and so forth, and not being centrally located to the rest of the town, we felt going back to Brigham Road was the smart place to do. And we own that property.
Okay, and as we've talked about, there is still the entity that's under contract with the town that's interested in taking some of the Brigham Road land for whatever purpose. Has anything changed on that front?
No, nothing's changed.
So that
There's an interest.
interested party is still there.
Right.
Will we hear some more about that presumably sometime this year?
I don't know.
Why can you say why is that? I mean, I've been hearing about that for months now. Why is that taking so long? Is it just a party that's not prepared to move on it more, or?
I'm reluctant to answer that question.
Okay.
I just not feel comfortable with that.
That's fine. I think Bruce has said before, but this interested party is under contract with the town about whatever this is about. That's what we've been told before anyway. But sounds like you don't want to.
Yeah.
That's fine. That's fine. Tim, any again that you think of the town where the room is, the developable land. Is the city, every once in a while people will ask me about, and Richard, there's railroad property. Why can't the city do something with the railroad property? Any potential in the city, within city limits to, of course you have the city industrial park, but any potential and then just not a lot of land?
Yeah, not a lot of land. I think the Fonda site is probably the primary one to try to wrap up. The railroad does have land. The railroad is tough to communicate. It's not New England Central or Rail America. It is Canadian National, or I think it's Canadian National. So, and they're very cautious in that if they were to do 10 subdivisions and sell them off on not only in St. Albans, but along the tracks themselves, that triggers Act 250. So there's some concern that they don't want to be selling off too much in any given year. The other piece of it is a lot of it might be considered brownfield and would need to be tested before someone were to buy it, and you need the owner's permission to do that in many cases. And they're not so likely to allow for that. Yeah. So those are probably the two main reasons. Yeah. I know the city's been fortunate with Market Street purchasing that, but I think that that's a little bit different than being right in amongst the tracks and the history that might follow that. So I think to your answer, or to your question, Fonda's probably the ideal site, and that was a brownfield as well, but it's been tested over and over, and I think everyone's pretty comfortable with what the contamination is and how to deal with it. So.
And that's been mentioned again. City Manager Dominic Cloud certainly not again. We've talked about how the police department seemingly on the move over to CCV off South Main Street. But again, the headquarters for police and fire now, outmoded building, not a good place. Sounds like the city city officials I've talked to would love to get the fire department out of there as well. So the Fonda site's come up as a possible site for that also.
In a floodplain, so
not a good site.
Not a good site overall. And there's discussions in the city as well about public works.
Right.
And public works, so.
What that might be utilized for. Right. So,
Al, down to just a couple minutes. Any quick issue you want to mention in the town we haven't touched on in a minute or so?
No, I think the big thing now is with this new board that we find common ground and know how to move forward as a unit. We just have one question on the Fonda site. Will you preserve a right-of-way so that you could continue Federal Street into extension to come back up to Route 7 further down?
Which certainly was talked about in years past. We're down to about 1 minute.
That's been discussed a lot. I do not know the where that stands at this time. I think it makes sense, but I'm not sure. I think there was concerns years ago, as Richard said, that that right away may not be as big as what we had hoped it to be. So,
anyway, on that issue, we'll leave it there. But again, many thanks to Mayor-elect
thank you,
Tim
Richard.
Smith. Tim, good to have you on the show. Congratulations again.
Thank you
on your election. And Al Voegele, St. Albans Town Selectman. Thanks, Al, for coming on board. We'll see what happens with the reorganizations. But again, thanks for the time. Thanks to Jerry and Elizabeth for doing all the hard work out there. Thanks for the calls. Thanks for watching us here on Northwest Access TV. And next show coming up on, I believe, April 4th, the next St. Albans Today show. And hopefully the May show at least will be at our new studios. Thanks for watching. So long. Richard Cowperthwait signing off. See ya.